An intense All-Stars clash has set the stage for the 2021 season ahead. Now the focus shifts towards the height of the pre-season, featuring two of rugby league's most iconic brands. Yes, hello and welcome to the Sideline Chat podcast, the one-stop shop for rugby league. Along with Mark Henry, I'm Connor Marcellus, and today we have the final four NRL teams to cover, and we begin today with looking at the South Sydney Rabbitohs.
Yes, South Sydney, coached by Wayne Bennett for what is the second and possibly final time for them being under Wayne Bennett. They had a pretty good season last season, and they'll be looking forward to doing the same again for 2021.
It did get off a little bit shaky, though. I mean, they had that close win against the Sharks in round one, and then it sort of went downhill after that, ending up with only 2 wins from the first 5 rounds. And it looked like they were going to miss the finals, didn't it?
It did a little bit, but just like another club that we talk about later on, they preserve their energy and go harder at their back end, from mid to back end of the season, and just be that little bit conservative at the start of the season to have less chance of getting injuries at the start.
Well, by mid-July, that was definitely the case. After giving the Dragons a 16-6 head start, the Bunnies then kicked on, and in the back 2 months, chalked up a 7-1 record to finish 6th on the ladder overall.
Yes, good record to have coming into the back end of the season, heading into finals football.
But if you had to sum up the Rabbitohs 2020 season in one word, I'll give you that one word. It was deja vu.
Yes, it was just a little bit.
Because it happened again. I mean, they blistered the Knights apart, they tore them apart, and then they rallied back to knock the Eels off at Bankwest Stadium, and then they get to the preliminary final against the Panthers, and there they are once more, 80 minutes away from the grand final, and they're on the wrong side of the scoreboard again.
Yes, yet again. It's a bit of a weaker area for that.
A curse.
A curse, yes.
I mean, since in the last 9 years, they've been in, barring 2016, 15 through to 17, they've practically been in every single preliminary final. And they've lost every time. Well, barring one. That was in 2014. But other than that, they lost to Canterbury 2012. They lost to Manly in 2013. They lost to the Roosters in 2018 after beating them in 2014. Then they lost to Canberra and Penrith in the last 2 years.
Hopefully Wayne Bennett can fix that issue. Well, not only Wayne Bennett, but the whole team really can help bring them up and make it to the grand final this year.
But like you said, it's their last chance to make the grand final under Wayne before he goes off into retirement or even onto a 17th team with Jason Demetriou to take over from 2022.
Yes, and depending if Wayne Bennett sets like a good culture around the club, Demetriou hasn't got much, they know he knows how the club runs, and being under Wayne Bennett, he's got that good experience, so he'll have no issue, no doubt about that.
I'm with you on that one. Looking at the best player, the losses of John Sutton and then both Sam and George Burgess, all up either retirement, medical retirement, or moving on. The Bunnies pack was bare. I think that was what most commentators were saying. The Bunnies were too light in the forward pack. But I'll tell you what, one man that stood out in that pack, it was Tom Burgess, the last of the 4 Burgess brothers there at the club, and he led from the front practically.
Yes.
146 metres on average he made, 31 tackle breaks. He was the one laying the platform that helped Cook, Walker and Mitchell work their craft. And I think he'll be an impact player next year. Well, this year, I should say.
Definitely he will be. Losing like his brothers and
John Sutton, legendary captain.
They did definitely lose like experience as well. But they've recruited well in the forwards such as George-Illawarra and Jacob Host. So they've got more experienced players there with it. So hopefully they will be pushing that a little bit more and getting back to how they were with Sutton and the other 3 Burgess brothers.
Arrow, I think, is probably the most shrewd acquisition they do have, and it was sort of like, it was a tug of war with a lot of Sydney clubs, wasn't it, that wanted Jai Arrow's services.
Yes, that's a definitely one, because Joe Arrow, we know what he did at the Titans, and I can see why most of the Sydney clubs wanted to sign him up, but Souths are the ones that got him.
As well as improving on their back row depth with Jacob Host, because that was sort of the thing after Sam Burgess's retirement. They've also stocked up on the centres as well. Tane Milne and Tau Moga from the Warriors and the Knights, respectively.
And getting Josh Mansell, who come from Penrith.
I think this should be a very strong message that we will take players that have had their backs turned on them. I think this is the Rabbitohs win and Penrith's loss big time.
Well, not only in that instant with Josh Mansell, but with Benji Marshall, who had the Tigers turn on him, and he was pretty much without a club until 3-4 weeks ago.
I think you're looking at, amongst these 6 men Wayne Bennett and his coaching team have signed, Mansour and Marshall could prove to be very shrewd signings that do a lot of good for the club.
Yes, no doubt about that. They've both been plenty of experience to help the young ones coming through. Yes, Adam Reynolds and Cody Walker are brilliant players already, but having the experience of Marshall there to help them will probably step their game up to the next level. With Josh Mansell, same with them, with the winners and that put them up to the next level.
Well, it has come at a bit of a cost, unfortunately, for South. Bailey Sirenen leaving for the Warriors, and he was a very good... I felt like he was going to start in the back row for them this year, had he stayed with South.
Yeah, I got the same feeling.
Corey Allen off to the Canterbury Bulldogs, so it sort of loosens the fullback stocks if Mitchell goes down injured, but I suppose they've got Johnston there, so that could slide in at any moment.
Yes.
Ethan Lowe, unfortunately, had to retire due to his neck complaint, which it's always sad when people are forced to medically retire.
Yes, very much so.
Jack Johns heading home to join the Newcastle Knights. James Roberts off to the Tigers, and probably the hardest pill to swallow, Joseph Suwali to the Sydney Roosters.
Yeah, it's a big one. Everyone's talking up Joseph Suwali, and South just couldn't quite hold on to him. But the Roosters got him. Losing, like they said, Ethan Lowe to retirement, and James Roberts. That's another kind of big loss for the Rabbits. Not Ethan Lowe. Well, not only Ethan Lowe, but James Roberts as well. The speed out wide. They're going to miss that, but they've got Mansell there, and like you already said, Johnston there already.
What they miss with Roberts, it's with his raw speed and agility. I think they'll compensate with Mansour's experience and possibly allow younger wingers to develop in the Rabbitohs junior system. First 5 rounds, it's very tough, I'd have to say, for South. 2 top 4 sides, but also 2 teams that didn't finish in the top 8, and the Wooden Spooners, starting off with the Melbourne Storm at Amy Park. Look, it's Melbourne all over. I mean, this will be the first game in Melbourne for close to a year, and it's the season opener. Storm will win. I wouldn't think big, but they'll have a lot of energy and emotion behind it. I think this will be an ambush game.
I completely agree. They have the momentum behind the Storm, and being, like you said, back at home for the first time in what feels like forever for them. Home crowd. It will be a close game. I reckon it'll be in favour of the Storm, but by 1 point.
2018 qualifying final type level?
Possibly, yes.
Round 2, they've got to face the Manly Sea Eagles, with the recent news that Tom Trebojevic won't be available until round 4. I got to lean in favour of the Rabbits here.
Yeah.
Especially, they'll keep in mind the round 15 clash where the Bunnies absolutely tore Manly to shreds.
Yep, I completely agree with you. The Rabbits on that one.
Round 3 on a Friday night, and this could be one where they actually do potentially face Joseph Suwali against the Roosters.
Yes. Always a good game between the Rabbits and the Roosters. On a Friday night makes it even better. But who knows who's going to win that one? It'll be a tight one.
I think I have got South slightly in front at this point in time.
Yeah, so do I. But depending on how the first 2 games go, it might change.
And the Roosters form as well.
And that too. So
traditional Good Friday clash against the Canterbury Bulldogs. This will be a highly entertaining clash with an improved dog side and a reinforced bunny side. Again, I think Sydney will just get over the top.
Well, every Good Friday game for the Dogs, Rabbit, no matter how good or bad they're going, where they are on the ladder, they always seem to turn it on. Don't know if it's the occasion or what, but both teams turn it on. But I'd say, who knows? The Dogs might cause an upset, but I'd say the Rabbits might just edge them.
And to wrap it off on round 5, it's gone from Seabold versus Bennett. It's now Bennett versus Walters.
Yes, very much
against
so.
the Brisbane Broncos. Oh, this has got to be a walk in the park for Bennett. He's got to steamroll Brisbane.
Oh, yeah, definitely. No doubt about that, because Bennett knows all the tricks that the Broncos do and don't do. So, yeah, it'll be a Rabbits victory for sure.
With Wayne, this is his third and his final year at South Sydney. And he's done well. He's gotten them a top 4 finish in 2019, and he got them to the preliminary final again in 2020. But it's coming at that point where the Bunnies are thinking Premiership 22, and this has got to be the year they have to deliver.
Yes. Under Wayne Bennett, they definitely have to. But who says that Bennett can't set them up and then Demetrio takes it to the one-step level? But like you said, Bennett's last year there. It has to be this year. They're going to win it.
And it will also be about execution at the right time, because in the last 3 preliminary finals, the Rabbitohs have not been able to execute like they have done either in the regular season or in semi-finals matches leading up to that big preliminary final occasion.
That's very true. It'll be a work in progress for him, as I say.
However, he has won State of Origin as of late, and I think there will be a spring in his step, and he'll think, you know what? I might be the oldest coach of the game, but I just won State of Origin with the worst Maroon side in 40 years. I'm going to win myself of another premiership.
Yes, that's good momentum and confidence to take into the team as well.
And I think Latrell Mitchell, he will evolve at fullback. I mean, he had a mixed performance, we'll say, and we'll get more into that when we cover the All-Stars game. But the longer the season goes, Mitchell will get better. And then you'll have Arrow leading the pack, Mansour scoring tries out wide, and then you'll have probably Benji Marshall floating around there, in and out, and maybe even snag a bench utility spot, who knows. But not only do I think the Rabbitohs take out the minor premiership, but I'm going to pick them to lift the premiership trophy over the Melbourne Storm this year.
No, I agree with you. They'll get the minor premiership this year. But I don't think they will make the grand final. But minor premiership for South, so it'll be a good boost for them going into the finals. But how deep do they go, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that one.
Well, last year, the Rabbitohs finished 6th and made it to the preliminary final. As you just heard, I think they're going to finish 1st, and they're my premiers.
Yeah, as I just said, they're my minor premiers, but not the premiers.
And where are they finishing? Oh, you said minor premiers.
Yeah.
Yep, gotcha. Well, universal consensus, but whether they lift the trophy or not, that could be a point of debate right there.
Okay, now to my team, the St. George-Illawarra Dragons. Well, where do I start with them? Where do I start?
Like, you're more informed than I am over St. George-Illawarra.
I don't like I don't like the signing of Jack Bird, but I mean, it is what it is. Until he gets more game time and performs well, I'm not convinced that we'll get many wins this season. Not just because of him signing, but the whole culture at the club at the moment, the new coach. It's just a bit of all over the place at the moment. With McGuinness gone for the season with the injury, that doesn't help either. Dufty, he needs to try and keep the fullback spot there. When you got young ones coming through like Cody Reams in that, it's all a bit all over the place at the moment, to be honest.
Well, would you define it as more over the place or less than the 0-4 start you had last year?
Don't know. Don't know quite yet. I had to see how we go this week in Charity Shield.
Well, you're definitely under the pump last year, because there were second half fade outs against the Tigers in round 1, controversial loss against the Panthers when you're up 28-18. That should never have been allowed to have been a penalty, I honestly believe.
No. Well, the first 2 games we should have won.
And then after that, you get crushed 40-2 in 2 weeks, first by the Warriors and then by the Bulldogs. scoreless one week, then triless the next week.
Yeah, I wasn't happy about them too, but cop it on chin. It was only early. The first two was only the early start of the season, which I understand, and then the restart against the Warriors and the Dogs. I get that too, but then after that, well, I don't know what went wrong, to be honest.
Well, on 3 separate occasions, you were able to register back-to-back wins, but it wasn't enough to get within close of making the finals, and unfortunately, it did see Paul McGregor walk out the door before he was pushed by the St. George-Illawarra board, and then Dean Young came in. 2 wins and 4 losses by the end of the season as well.
Yeah, maybe. Well, how I understand it, I don't know how true it is, but I've heard that there was rifts between half the players group was on McGregor's side, half wasn't. Maybe that got us not clicking and playing well together because of that, but I don't know. That's only what I've heard.
Yeah.
But losing other players such as Frizzell to the Knights and James Graham, who left mid-season
to join St. Helens, and now he's entered retirement as well.
They're good. They're decent losses, but don't know how we'll go without the experience of James Graham though, and the leadership that he brought to the club.
Yeah. Well, speaking of leadership, the best player once again, you can't go past Cam McInnes. With Origin and international stars like Ben Hunt, Corey Norman, and Tyson Frizzell all failing the fire, it was all on McInnes, and he was asked to play the majority of that season in the middle of the field with Hunt at dummy half and Adam Clune at halfback. But still, he didn't complain.
No, he didn't. He said wherever the coach wanted him, he will play and do the best he absolutely can, and he did that. So it's sad to not only he's going to the Sharks in 22, but losing him
for 2021 for the ACL injury.
Yes.
While he wasn't injured, he averaged 120 metres, a big tackle leader in defence, 978 tackles he made across the entire season, and he also contributed 14 offloads. I feel, had he not played, and this could easily be the case now, the Dragons are worse off without him.
Yes, I can say that too. I am biased in some ways, but not in this way, no.
On top of losing Tyson Frizzell to the Newcastle Knights, you've also lost Corbin Sims to Hull Kingston Rovers. Jason Saab, after a messy divorce, is now up at the Manly Sea Eagles. As we just touched on with the Rabbitohs, Jacob Host joins them, and Ewan Aiken joins the New Zealand Warriors.
Yes. Maybe Saab trying to get a release too put us off a little bit too. Even Tristan Saylor trying to get a release too, which, how I understand, has occurred.
Well, he was let go because he didn't get a new contract, and then he's had that fallout in his off-field life since.
So, we've lost 2 young kids coming through, but you can't keep them all forever.
No, you can't. On the other side of the equation, Jack Bird coming in from the Broncos, and I think many would agree on a bargain price to the $1 million he was getting paid for at Brisbane.
Yes, it is a bargain price, but because of his injuries over the last 3 or so seasons, I'm not convinced he will do well. But until a few rounds into the season, then I might change my mind.
Well, it seems to be a bit of an ex-Broncos club building at the Dragons. Andrew McCulloch also joining the Dragons after, what was it, a couple of months back at the Broncos?
Yeah. It wasn't long after the loan deal finished at the Knights, and then he went back up to Brisbane.
And then they saw fit to let him go, and now he's at St. George-Illawarra.
Immediately, yes.
Depth in the forwards, Poasa Farmasili, he joining up from the Sydney Roosters, who also had a good loan stint at the Warriors, and Daniel Alvaro from the Parramatta Eels.
Yeah, we've created reasonable. I would like to see a couple more players. I don't know who, but just probably a little bit more depth in a few
key positions
here and there. But I have got like young kids coming through, like the Feagai twins, so there's some depth there. But we'll manage somehow.
Looking at the first 5 rounds, you start off your 100th anniversary season up against the Cronulla Sharks.
Local derby. What else could you want to kick off the 100th season for the St. George district?
it's going to be a close game. The Sharks are in somewhat of a similar position at the moment to the Dragons, and I think you might just be able to come away with this one.
Well, the Sharks have got a consistent coach going into the season. We've got a new coach coming in. But Anthony Griffin ain't a bad coach, so that can go either way, that one.
Round 2, a Saturday night in Townsville at the Queensland Country Bank Stadium against the North Queensland Cowboys.
Well, it's kind of like the Sharks in a way. They're kind of in the same position. The Cowboys are kind of in the same position as the Dragons and the Sharks. That one can go either way too, to be honest.
It definitely can. Friday night in the Gong, you're up against a Tom Trebojevic less Manly side. I think
that should work in our favour.
Should, but we know Desi Hasler and we know Manly. That often tends not to be the case.
Yes.
Easter Sunday sees you take a trip up the M1 to the Hunter Valley and to play the Newcastle Knights.
For the Alex McKinnon Cup, yes. We tend to go alright in the Hunter at McDonald Jones Stadium, so...
You forgot last time, didn't you?
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. I did, but generally, on average, like, the balance of the last 10 or so years have been going alright. So...
And
that one can go either way.
Cap off round 5, a Sunday night at Bankwest Stadium and the Parramatta Eels.
Well, the form that Dragons have at Bankwest Stadium isn't very good.
Well, against Parramatta, you currently sit 1-1 after that shock win that was Paul McGregor's last game where you won 14-12.
True, but the first time we played there wasn't pretty.
No, it wasn't.
So,
and I think the Eels are in a far better position than St. George-Illawarra are anyway.
No doubt about that. I agree.
So as we've been alluding to, or Mark has been alluding to, Anthony Griffin takes charge of his first club in 3 years.
Yes. It'll be. I don't know how rusty he'll be or anything, or what he's been doing between his last club, the Panthers, and now us. He'll probably be there or thereabouts. To bring. Well, McCulloch was playing with him.
He was playing under Griffin at the Broncos. Ben Hunt, Corey Norman. They all played under Griffin at the Broncos.
So, them 3 players we know have played underneath Griffin, so they'll know what he's like. Who knows? It could be a good thing for us this season, but if anything to go by, I'd say it will be 2022 that will be up a bit more.
Even without McInnes?
Yes. Because the experience of McCulloch, we know what he's like.
Well, you also have to figure in, Griffin will have learned from his previous mistakes he made at Penrith when he got the push in favour of Serraldo and then Ivan Cleary. And he's not a bad coach. I mean, 3 consecutive semi-final appearances with the Panthers between 2016 and 18. And he did get the Broncos to within 80 minutes of the grand final in 2011, albeit losing to Manly after that.
That's very true. What can he do with us? Have to wait and see.
Well, he's already named Ben Hunt not only the captain, but he also intends to play him at halfback.
Yes.
Right? So it'll be interesting to see how he uses Adam Clune, whether he's starting in the halves or he's biding his time with the Dragons in the New South Wales Cup and then comes in at various stages.
Not only Adam Clune, but Jaden Sullivan too.
Well, Sullivan's recent performances in the trial matches against the Sharks and against the Eels, there's a lot of promise around him at the moment.
So maybe Sullivan might get a head start over Clune, maybe, possibly. I know Clune's had more NRL experience, but if going by form at the moment in the trial matches, yes, Clune hasn't played yet, but Sullivan, watch out. There'll be probably a fight between Clune and Sullivan.
I think there's the winning formula between McGregor and Young was Clune at halfback, Hunt at hooker, but I think Griffin's going to stick to his guns and what he knows he can get out of players like Norman and Hunt. So
yes.
I think even though we might predict Hunt will start at dummy half, it could easily be the case he starts at halfback.
Yeah.
Regardless, he'll have the C next to his name.
Yes.
I think if the Dragons can shank at least 3 wins out of these first 5, I think that it would be good signs. They're not as bad as the 2020 side, even with no McInnes. But I really, really wouldn't expect too much improvement. I think if you can get another year out of Clune and maybe Max Feagai to try and get them up to scratch the same way Zach Lomax is now in the New South Wales camp, then I think this could be a good development year for the club itself.
Or do you put Cody Ramsey in that group with Max Guy and Adam Clune as well?
I wouldn't leave Cody Ramsey out. No.
Even his form in the trial was really good, so he's carried on.
Lightning fast.
No doubt about that. Him and Dufty, them in the back line together. Watch out.
What, like Ramsey wing and Duffy fullback? I could probably see that happening.
Yeah.
All the questions around Ravawala's hands, if that can improve.
Well, yeah.
Last year, the Dragons finished 12th on the ladder. I think they still finished 12th. I think there's a lot of sides ahead of them, but they're still ahead of a lot of other sides that we think will be ranked lower this year.
I completely disagree with you. Yes, there'll be signs of improvement, don't get me wrong. But I'd say we slip down from 12th and get the wooden spoon.
From one side that says, there's hope, to the other side, oh, write us off now.
Pretty much. I'd say the loss of McGuinness and Frizzell and Graham will be the
death knell.
Yeah, the nail in the coffin for us this season. I know I'm a die-hard fan, but wooden spoon, that's where I see us this year.
Well, you know what they say, honesty is the best policy.
Yep.
Now, moving on, the Sydney Roosters. Well, how about the Roosters? A strong year, we'll have to say, for the former two-time reigning premiers. And they had the biggest target on their back when you're the first team in 25 years to try and have a crack at the three-peat.
Yes, which ultimately didn't happen.
After the first two games where they lost out against the Panthers and then defeated by Manly by a field goal, they were virtually untroubled after May when all the broken bodies were healed up and Boyd Cordner was back. And they were relatively untroubled. Classic games. Storm at Suncorp and then the grand final rematch against the Canberra Raiders at the cricket ground.
Any grand final rematch, regardless if it's the Roosters in or not, are always good matches.
And from that shaky start of losing the first two, they ended up finishing 4th on the ladder. But by that point, you could see, even with Sonny Bill Williams coming in, things were starting to fall apart.
Well, without having Victor Radley there with his injury, that obviously did not help at all.
And then losing Sam Verrills, I think, in the same game, wasn't it?
Or it might have been the following game. It might have been the same game. They were very close together, Victor Radley and Sam Verrills. That didn't help at all. Maybe if they had them there, they could have gone on to maybe potentially fight for 3, Pete. I thought when they lost the first two games of the season, so that's definitely not like the Roosters at all.
Well, we also got to remember they came back from the World Club Challenge victory over St Helens, and that was probably a very intense clash, especially with Saints getting the upper hand early, and then the Roosters having to come back late to overpower them.
True. But Trent Robinson, he knows what he's doing. He's done it before. Start them off. They might not be up in the top 8 within the first part of the year, but by in the last 5 rounds generally, whether it's a 20 or 25 round season, they'll be there.
Yeah, well, getting back to the finals, they lost to the Panthers by a field goal in the qualifying final, and then they were bounced out by the Raiders with a last-minute mistake from Tedesco that set up Jack Whiten for the semi-finals winning try. And there, the dreams of the three-peat came to an end.
Well, not even... It always kind of started in the last round too, when they got absolutely belted by
the Rabbitohs.
So that form from there kind of carried on, but they improved in the finals, but
not enough, and they went out in straight sets.
Yes, which is not like the Roosters at all.
Well, this will be like the Roosters. Their best player, I mean, everyone will point to James Tedesco, wouldn't they?
Yes, they know. Yes, he's a good player, don't get me wrong, but Luke Keary stood out for me in 2020. Without Boyd Cordner being there when he was out with concussion and injuries.
And now being asked to sit down for about 3 months while neurosurgeons have a look at him.
Yes.
I think they've given him the all clear, haven't they? Though that he said, even though he's fine and there's no damage, they're saying maybe just sit 3 months out just to be sure.
Yeah. But when Cordner wasn't there, Luke Keary stepped up. So I think alongside Tedesco, we all know how good he is, but I reckon Luke Keary was the standout player for 2020.
I'm with you on that. I mean, he did force 17 goal line dropouts and he set up 18 tries, demonstrating that he was practically in the Roosters attack the go-to man. And if you wanted to try and find a try or two.
Yes. And he, in a way, like Kyle Flanagan, he has had some experience, but he kind of had that lack of experience in the halves alongside him, so that put a bit more pressure on it, and he lived up to it, don't get me wrong.
He certainly did. And he's got a lot of rookie 5'8s to deal with now he's moving to halfback. Between Lachlan Lamb, Adam Kieran, and Sam Walker that they keep talking about out as being a promise for the future, but I would expect nothing to change with Luke Keary individually, with his good run of form and a steady anchor for whoever is his halves partner come round one.
Well, he was in the Blues camp at the end of the season.
And he was starting 5'8 alongside Nathan Cleary, but
yes,
unfortunately, Origin's a bit of a cutthroat business and he was axed for Cody Walker the following week.
Yes, but Keary, he knows how to play big pressure games, don't get me wrong.
I mean, he's won three premierships. One where he was a supporting act to Adam Reynolds, and the other two, I mean, 2018 he was basically the maestro in destroying the Melbourne Storm, and he helped back it up a year later when they took down the Raiders.
Maybe, yes, it was good on him that he made a Blues camp, don't get me wrong, but he maybe underperformed due to that the Origin arena is a lot different to the Grand Final arena. So that probably got to him that little bit.
Players that won't be joining the Roosters this year, Christian Tuipulotu off to the Manly Sea Eagles, Kyle Flanagan, the highest profile defection, leaving for the Canterbury Bulldogs after being punted.
Unfairly.
Club stalwart and all-time uncapped player for the Roosters, Mitch Orbison, entering retirement after more than 300 appearances for the club. Pawasa Farmasili joining the St George-Illawarra Dragons. Ryan Hall returning to England with Hull Kingston Rovers, and I think it's confirmed at this stage that Sonny Bill Williams has retired.
There you go. I didn't know he had retired.
I think that still is the case because Toronto's, I wouldn't say defunct, but they're sort of in a state of limbo at the moment.
Yeah, well, if you go back a few episodes ago, you're able to hear our thoughts on Toronto Wolfpack.
And on the other side, they picked up Adam Kieran from the Warriors. I think he should personally be starting because he's probably the best goal kicker the Roosters have that can play the full 80.
Yeah.
And the biggest coup and probably the biggest chapter in the Book of Feuds in recent years, Joseph Suaalii picked up from the South Sydney Rabbitohs.
Both Kieran and Suaalii have been excellent signings from them. I agree with you. I reckon Kieran will slot straight into the halfback role and Keary will be playing his normal 5'8" role. So it'll be a Kieran Keary halves combination and a Suaalii. The Roosters are trying to get exemption from the NRL to play him under the new rules that they're not allowed to play under 18 players in the NRL.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. Whether the NRL reviews that case or maybe if they just lift the sombrero with Uncle Nick coming out of the top of it, just like, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
Well, that's possible. The Roosters, they know what they're doing, clearly. Whether or not they let Suaalii play the NRL, he doesn't turn 18 to mid-year, is that correct? Or was that next year?
We can verify on that too.
Yeah. But he turns 18 soon, so...
They probably would play him at some point.
Yeah. But NRL will probably be scared of Uncle Nick, I'd say. If he does play, whenever Suaalii plays against Rabbitohs, watch out. That match is already entertaining enough.
Looking at the first 5 weeks for the Roosters, they got Manly at this stage at the SCG, whether or not the AFL have announced their draw yet, which has ramifications for the Roosters. I think it's a Roosters victory.
Yes.
Sunday afternoon, they got to travel west to take on the Tigers at Campbelltown. Yeah, I think the Roosters can win that one easily.
Yep.
Friday night in round 3, Against South, whether Suwali's there or not, there's still a lot of tension between these two sides. But when has there never been tension?
Well, never. It's always been tension between them two.
It runs deep along both sides of Anzac Parade.
Yes.
But I think the Rabbits come away, as we've just said. Easter Sunday against the Warriors, whether or not that's at the SCG or not again, and it's the same story with round 5 against the Sharks. I think the Roosters come away with wins on both of these occasions as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you against the Warriors and the Sharks. It's good to see him back at the Sydney Cricket Ground again. And 3 times out of the first 5 weeks, so obviously depending on the AFL. No, it'll be. I see that this Roosters getting at least 3, 4 out of 5 wins in the first 5 weeks.
I think the biggest problem, though, as we've touched on, goal kicking. Because whilst the Roosters have their reasons for moving Kyle Flanagan on, what he did provide for them was points off the boot.
Yes.
And a very good conversion rate as well. So Siosiwa, Taukiaho, as well as Kieran, they're the only 2 options the Roosters have in their goal-kicking arsenals that would most likely get some game time.
If they don't play Kieran in the halves, and they're going to play Sam Walker, seems to be the favourite at this stage.
Well, I think Lachlan Land, they're saying, is going to get the first crack.
Well, Lachlan Lamb, sorry. Takiao will be the goal kicker then. But then he doesn't play the full 80 minutes, and you kind of need a goal kicker there for the full 80.
He could play the full 80, but that might hamper his workload out at the back end of the season. We'll have to see what Trent Robertson's got in store, but the idea that the Roosters are not going to be in the top 4, I think what people don't realise is the Roosters have now been provoked. They were comfortable when they were 2-time premiers. A shock semi-finals exit to Canberra, I think you've just disturbed the beast.
Yes.
And Trent Robertson's now been working busily over these last few months of the preseason. And I think he's got a surprise coming in for everyone who thinks the Roosters aren't going to be in the top 4.
Is that surprise Joseph Suwali coming into the side?
Um,
We have to wait and see.
It could be the case. But I think with Craig Fitzgibbon at the club, who is one of the Roosters' main goal-kicking specialists, and he's had a good success when he was playing, I think it will be in the development stage, but I think it's all about timing. And the Roosters are pretty good at their timing when it comes to big things like this.
Just look at 2020. Started off slow, worked our way up.
Last year, the Roosters finished in 4th and were knocked out in the semi-finals by Canberra. I think they're going to go better now that they've been provoked. They got the hunger back, and I'm going to say they finished 2nd on the ladder.
I agree. They finished 2nd on the ladder. They will be looking to improve on their 4th. Hopefully, they don't have they don't have a slower. They have a bit of a better start to the season than what they did.
I think it definitely will be a better start than last year for the Roosters.
That's probably what let them down for a top 2 spot in 2020.
Yeah.
So, as I said, 2nd overall.
Yeah, that is definitely the case. Now, here we go. The West Tigers, the final of the 28 first-grade clubs we have covered since January.
Yes. It seems like a long time since back then, but we finally got there. The Tigers, big losses at some stage throughout the seasons. Narrow victories.
And they've had big wins as well. Don't forget the big wins.
Yes. They've kind of been big wins, big losses, I'll confuse myself. Big wins, small losses, big losses.
Well, they were looking for a miracle and good run of form. Then the loan deal between Paul Momirovski and Melbourne's Harry Grant, that came through at last, which now set the precedent that loan deals can become part of the NRL full-time, and there are upsides. The Tigers were the ultimate winners out of this loan deal from the restart.
No doubt about that.
By mid-July, halfway point of the season, they were inside the top 8 and they had knocked the Broncos off at 48-0.
that it's a good scoreline, but you had to think it was against the Broncos too.
It was against the Broncos. It definitely was. But as in previous years, they were dogged by inconsistency. Basically, for every one win they registered, 2 to 3 losses seemed to follow in the wake.
True. Is that because of the inconsistent starting lineups?
The chopping and changing of Michael Maguire's lineup.
Well, not only the halves and the dummy half, but the fullback and everything. They were chopping and changing too much.
It definitely was. And despite being ninth when they beat Manly in round 16, 3 straight losses to top 8 sides, including the Rabbitohs and the Eels, and they dropped to 11th on the ladder and they missed the finals once more.
For what?
This is now
This will be
the 9th year in a row they've missed the finals, and they're very much in danger of making it 10 if something doesn't change this year.
It's a long time for doing drinks for the finals appearances for the Tigers. Who knows what can happen again? It's rugby league.
Well,
flip a coin, pick a side, and even that won't even help your cause much.
Yeah, it definitely won't. I think we all agree Benji Marshall was very influential in the Tigers' spine. Harry Grant stood out majorly.
Mate, it sucks that Harry Grant has gone back to the Storm. It's a loss for the Tigers, but a gain again for the Storm without Cam Smith. If Cam Smith played on, I reckon the Storm would have allowed
Harry Grant would have gotten a lifetime deal. I mean, all the jokes about giving him the key to the city just to keep him there at Leichhardt.
Yeah, because he was arguably the best player of the season for the Tigers.
Well, in a short 15-game loan spell, he contributed 5 try assists, 11 offloads, and ate up 746 tackles in defence, and he made the West Tigers really competitive right up until September at the business end of the season.
Probably, yes, I agree. If they continued that, they could have made the top 8 for the first time in a long time.
Since 2011.
But they just, what seems to be they burned out right at the crucial part of the season, which is at the back end of the season.
It definitely was the case. And the Tigers will greatly miss his presence in 2021 as he returns to Melbourne to succeed Cameron Smith.
Yes. Also, the players that will be missing, as we mentioned, Benji Marshall, Harry Grant, Paul Momirovski is going to Penrith, Kane Bradley's going to the Cowboys, Elijah Taylor going to Salford, Josh Reynolds going to Hull FC, Josh Alloway to Manly, Sam McIntyre to Titans, Matt Eisenhuth to Panthers alongside Robert Jennings, Chris McQueen to Huddersfield, and Chris Lawrence has retired after a glittering career, you could say.
Yeah, not well. Loyal career. One club man the whole way through for Chris Lawrence.
Yes.
On the other side of the equation, probably one of the biggest signings they've got, James Tarmo coming in from the Penrith Panthers, and he is, of course, now the Tigers captain. James Roberts coming into the Rabbitohs, Stefano Oitokamanu from the Parramatta Eels, Joe Offa-Ngowi from the Broncos, and a bit of a coup also from Penrith, Dane Laurie coming in on a year early on his 2-year deal.
Yeah, because it's going to be there in 22, but
the swap with Momirovski, which we sort of actually forgot to mention 2 weeks ago, or even last week. Last week. I should say, in our Penrith preview, that Momirovski did actually join Penrith.
Yep.
Leaving the Tigers, but better late than never to issue corrections on that regard.
The Tigers have also gained Tukey Simpkins from the Cowboys, and Jock Madden, Jake Simpkin, and Zach Senior have all been promoted to the...
Any word on Reece Hoffman? Because I think they were sort of teasing Hoffman for a while as well.
I think he played in the recent trial match in the Tigers B team against the Roosters B team on Saturday. I don't know. There hasn't been any... I think he's on a training trial contract at the moment, as I remember the commentators in that match saying. Hopefully he gets a contract and fills up being the top 30.
Well, who knows? Looking at the Tigers' first 5 rounds, it's not looking good for them, to say the least.
No.
They got to travel to Canberra in round 1 against the Green Machine.
That's never a good start.
You're asking for trouble against the Raiders.
Especially at Canberra home ground.
Then round 2 on a Sunday afternoon, they got to face the Roosters.
Well, we know how dominant Roosters can be. Shut the gate.
Yeah. Round 3, they got to go up against the Newcastle Knights. I think the memories of that 44-4 will still be fresh in the minds after their last trip to Newcastle.
Yes.
Easter Monday, they've got to go up against the Parramatta Eels, and they thought the best way to get a competitive advantage, move it from Bankwest Stadium to Stadium Australia.
Well, yes, Bankwest is Eels' home game, but the Tigers were scheduled to have their home game at Bankwest, but they moved it.
They say they wanted to get a larger crowd, but come on.
They
didn't want to play at Bankwest Stadium because they know their record is so bad at Bankwest Stadium. How many times have you seen the Tigers win at Bankwest?
Never. Regardless of its home or away, they have never.
And when they do play, they get towed up by almost everyone. I mean, first time they played, it was 51-6.
Yeah.
And then the Raiders, they came along 28-0.
Yep. So.
Oh wait, hang on. The Tigers actually have won at Bankwest.
But very minimal.
29-28 against Canterbury. I think about round 15.
Yes.
They did actually get a win, but their record overall is 90% in the loss column and maybe only 10% at the win. So
they say they're moving it to Stadium Australia for the bigger crowds. That's what they're telling everyone.
They just want to get away from Bankwest, but it still won't do any good. They'll still lose to the Eels.
Well, it's a cheeky little play by the Tigers too, to be honest. It could work out for them. It could not work out for them. We have to wait till Easter Monday on the 5th of April to see what occurs in that match.
Yes, indeed. And to back it up, they've got another Sunday afternoon at Leichhardt Oval against the Cowboys. But good news, it's the Cowboys, and it's at Leichhardt Oval.
Which is a very traditional
And North
ground.
Queensland have not had a good run at form ever at this venue. So you've got to back the Tigers in on that one.
But the Tigers been a traditional ground, Leichhardt Oval. Mate, at Leichhardt Oval on, what was it, a Sunday afternoon?
Sunday afternoon.
Mate.
On Channel 9.
What could you more? Sunday Arvo footy, free to air, on a suburban traditional ground. What more could you ask for?
You really can't ask for anything else.
Tigers will definitely get the win in that one.
I think there's a little bit of a mixed feeling about the Tigers at the moment. Good news they bring in a leader like James Tarmo and they hand him the captaincy almost straight away.
Practically.
But I think they've got a bit of a problem around about the spine at the moment. I mean, I think Jacob Little, we know, is going to start first in the absence of Harry Grant's return to Melbourne. And, of course, they got that logjam on 5/8 and fullbacks between Moses Mbai, Dane Laurie and Adam Dewey at the moment. I think Mbai will, for me personally, Mbai starts at fullback and Laurie moves into the halves. But the question is, how do you shape that up when Adam Dewey comes back into the equation?
I personally think Mbai will be in the halves, and Dewey will be at fullback. Dane Laurie, I don't know where he will slot in. He may miss the first few weeks, but he'll be there for more depth for at least this season. That's just my personal feeling.
And if they get the centre combination of Joey Leilua and James Roberts right, you're in trouble. But I just, with the spine a little bit disconjointed as it stands, and having lost Benji Marshall's presence that could steady the ship, you got more pressure back on Luke Brooks again, and it's just like Tigers fans are just hoping Brooks finally steps up and takes charge of this Tigers outfit. But
even before Benji came back to the club, you could say, when Mitchell Moses left to go to Parramatta, Moses and Brooks were looking to be a really good, strong combination. But ever since Moses left, it hasn't been. Luke Brooks hasn't quite been how he was before. But then Marshall came back, which helped him a bit. But without Marshall again, who knows? He really needs to pick up his game this year, Luke Brooks. Otherwise, what I've heard, Is if Luke Brooks doesn't pick up his game, he's out of there. Even though he's contracted until 2023.
Well, contracts mean little word in today's climate. I mean, a contract is just a piece of paper.
Pretty
A piece
much.
of paper can be torn up. If it was solid gold, you can't tear solid gold up. But until a contract becomes solid gold that cannot be destroyed, you're going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah. So it's a
Um,
big year for Luke Brooks.
I think they will be competitive, but with the way their spines are arranged at the moment, and a lot of clubs below them moving above them, it's going to be a matter of time before the Tigers collapse again, and they miss the finals for the 10th straight year. Because last year they finished 11th, but with no Aloye, no Marshall,
No Chris Lawrence.
I think they'll go worse. I think they'll end up finishing 14th on the ladder.
Well, one thing the Tigers need to stop doing is chopping and changing their halves and their fullback.
That was probably a big problem at the back end of
That was the biggest
2020
problem
season.
in 2020 for the Tigers. They need to stop doing it. They need to stick with it. And if they stick to one set, then they'll be up there. If they do that, I'll put them in 9th and miss out the finals for a 10th straight year.
One that decides bottom 4, the other one that says, I'm going to be a jerk, and I'm going to tease you with the fact I'm going to name them in 9th again.
But 2022 might be a different story depending on how Luke Brooks goes. Because there's a certain name of Jock Madden coming through, and he's a future superstar, that kid.
Now, turning our attention, the NRL All-Stars match between the Indigenous and the Maori for the 3rd consecutive time. I'm in this current All-Stars format.
It was a good game.
It was close. It was definitely like that, not like what the commentators have said in the past, where it's all this big score lines, these blowouts, where it could be one year the Indigenous get on top, then the next year the Maori return serve. This year, it felt like a true grudge match.
Well, that is true with the big score lines. We had to think the conditions were 100% humidity and it was wet. That probably, the humidity would have played a massive part in. Yes, it was 20 points up in total. It was still a good game, but the wet weather, footy in wet weather is good, but the humidity is what probably got to the players the most. Yes, they had unlimited interchange, but
even so,
that wouldn't have done much.
A couple of standout things for me I think you look at that Benji Marshall when he set up that try for Jordan Ricky. That was sort of like they finally were able to get what their plan was early, because they had a couple of opportunities with Dylan Walker and Patrick Herbert on that left edge where they tried to go at Fogarty. They tried to bring Ferguson in to try and shoot out of the line, but the defense of the Indigenous All-Stars came out on top.
It was like a brick wall, literally like a brick wall. The Maori side had so many opportunities
in the early stages.
On the try line, but they just couldn't break through. But then once Benji Marshall set up Jordan Ricky, that broke.
You're looking at from Marshall King to Marshall, sort of like the brothers Marshall together. Then you had that cutter pass going at Jamal Fogarty, which they were doing early on, and then Ricky was it hit and spin, and then he fell on the line, but you couldn't really tell where the ball was.
No, not really, but it was.
The referee was confident enough to award the try.
It was a try, and that was put Maori on the scoreboard.
Yeah, after the Indigenous All-Stars kicked the penalty goal early. I think, was it on first quarter time or half time?
It was on the... give me a moment. I think it was in the end of first quarter time. As the game was played. Yes, it was at the end of first quarter time.
Yeah, and of course the Indigenous would take close to an hour, wasn't it, to try and answer in response, and it was Latrell Mitchell's left boot setting up a crossfield kick, threading the needle through for Alex Johnston to go over, and he practically caught Chant Nickel-Clockstad out of position, who was also solid at the back.
Yes, it was 64th minute of there or thereabouts. Is when the first try happened for an Indigenous side. But what a good setup that was.
Oh, that definitely was a
Curra
good kick.
kick through from Mitchell and then to Johnston.
Yeah, that combination, I think that they're trying to perfect that ahead of the Charity Shield.
Or end the season as
the
well.
draw. I want to ask this question now, and I'll pose it to you, the audience. Why didn't the Maoris retain the shield, the trophy, as it were?
I don't know. Well, there was no golden point, but I thought if there's no golden point and it's a draw, I thought it'd be like the Charity Shield, because one year it was I think it was a 12-all draw in the Charity Shield between the Dragons and the Rabbits, and because the Rabbits had won it the year before, they'd keep the Charity Shield. I thought that would have been the same thing in the Indigenous Maori side, but clearly it's not.
I would have thought there would have, as another precedent that we all should acknowledge, is the 2002 State of Origin series, where New South Wales and Queensland had one all between them, and then there was a draw in game 3, but Queensland, because they won it the year before, they were returned with the Origin Shield. So I thought, all right, so Mitchell's going to take this penalty goal with a minute to go. I thought, all right, so the Maoris are going to get at the win regardless, because it'll be a draw and they'll retain the trophy automatically. But turns out, just
they share
it was an anticlimax, that ending.
Well, would have the Indigenous side gone for the penalty goal if they... So, say there was golden point. If there wasn't golden point, would they have not gone for the penalty goal? Would they have gone for a try instead to try and get the win?
I thought they were honestly setting up for a field goal attempt. Like, try and get Latrell as far as the 40, and then he just slots one over from there.
In that new rule where it's a 2-point field goal from 40 metres or back. Yeah, that was a bit of an odd one. I'd say if there was a golden point, then take the 2. But if there wasn't any golden point, I would have gone for try and go for the try. But they didn't know that until they'd already said penalty goal. They were going to take the penalty goal, and it was going to be... Well, they already pretty much had it set up ready to go. And then the referee reminded them about the kickoff saying no golden point. So it's a bit of a strange one. Hopefully they change that rule so it goes back to whoever won it the year prior.
Exactly. There was some good enterprising play down the left edge of the Indigenous side, but Latrell Mitchell, I mean, he did set up that try assist and he did kick a couple of goals, but there were moments where you sort of looked and you questioned, why did you do this? Like the offload to Jack Whiten, that was the knock on. That didn't need to be thrown. And then he tried pushing the pass when they tried to create the 2-on-1 on at various stages between Walker and Johnston, and that just sort of ended up horribly wrong as well. Just
yes, it very much.
I mean, we do say he needs to get involved, but he doesn't need to be pushing unnecessary passes.
Yes. Speaking of passes, that try for I think it was the Maori side.
The Maoris, the intercept from Fogarty.
Or was it Manu?
Manu took the intercept, that Fogarty throw, and then he had cover coming across. I think Latrell was coming across and Jack Whiten. And then
3 Indigenous players that were coming.
And then Wateni Zalesniak was backing up in support. Surely Manu could have gone all the way, though.
He could have. I felt like he could have, but he passed the door to Zalesniak to definitely make sure they had them points. Yeah. Which, it's best to pass it, even though he could score his took off. It's better to pass it to someone else who is definitely going to score it. It's better to be safe than sorry and get more points on the board than not get points on the board.
It definitely is, but I think there was a lot of promise with Latrell, and we'll continue on this theme. We'll now switch focus up to the Charity Shield clash.
Played at Glen Wheeler Oval in Mudgee for the 3rd straight year.
I believe this is the case.
And I have signed a deal with the
Mudgee Council
for another further 3 seasons to have the Charity Shield out
there. That's good news.
Good news for regional New South Wales as well. Getting more money coming into the area after lockdowns and everything that's happened in 2020 will be good.
Looking at this South lineup, because the Dragons have not necessarily ordered their squad, sort of like, I thought Josh Mansour would have been starting up first, but instead of him, they've got Jackson Paulo lined up with Dane Gagai on one edge, and then it's Campbell Graham and Alex Johnston on the other side.
I'd say what they would do is either put Paulo in there for the first half, and then Mansour in for the second half. That's the only way and reason why I think they did do that. I could be wrong, but that's the only reason I can think of.
Case. Jai Arrow joining the bench in number 24 alongside Josh Cook, Patrick Mago, Dean Hawkins, Mark Nichols, Benji Marshall, Hame Sele, Troy Dargan, Stephen Masters, Tau Moga, and Blake Taff.
Yes.
Interesting decision. I think they're sort of trying to test this out with the back rowers, with Kalola Matungi and Jacob Post both starting and Cameron Murray in the middle of the field. I still think this is the best way for South Sydney. Murray in the middle of the field, and then, of course, between Tom Burgess and Junior Totola, they can swap Jai Arrow in and out at various stages of that.
Yes.
As for the Dragons, well, we can assume Duffy will start at fullback, jostling between, I think, Michaeli Ravawala and Cody Ramsey for that right-wing edge. Norman and Hunt in the halves, and then McCulloch at dummy half, and then they'll try and sort things out between Laurie, Kerr, and Paul Vaughan as to who actually starts where in the front row, in the middle rotation, I should say. But
yes. Jack Bird, he played a bit of centre in the trial match against Parramatta. So.
He was starting at centre the whole time, as it was the case. Whether he gets up over Max Guy first, or whether Bird actually does revert to the original plan of him playing in the middle, I think that remains to be seen.
It's pretty much a last shot for Bird to be at centre to prove Anthony Griffin that he can play centre.
Well, he wants to be in the centres. Whether that is the case, who knows? I think the big thing for the Dragons is this will be the first time the whole A team is here, because they've had members of the A team in the B team trial matches. Jackson Ford and Tarek Sims left a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
Just sort of like with the errors and the missed tackles and that, sort of like being exposed in defence.
Is that
Jaden Sullivan being included? If they wanted to switch things up, bring Sullivan on with Adam Clune at the same time, and Cody Ramsey.
Or they could put Sullivan alongside Norman or Hunt at the time, and put Hunt back into hooker or whatever. There could be a lot of positional changes throughout that game.
Yeah, I definitely think they could, but I think by the end of it, I think we will agree Jackson Ford will start in the back row for the Dragons. Jack Bird will be somewhere in the starting 13, whether it's centre or lock, and probably Sullivan gets first crack in the halves with Ben Hunt, and then Corey Norman comes back in after he serves his one-match suspension.
Yes, I'd put, or you could even put Jack Bird off the bench. Yes, it'll be interesting to see how Hook goes with the squad come game day.
It definitely will be.
Well, and even see how the Rabbitohs go as well. Like they've got a strong lineup on paper.
I'm willing to back the Rabbitohs in at this point. I think this is a very well-rounded side. They've got a strong pack. Benji Marshall and Josh Mansour looking to prove a point both to the Western Sydney rivals that abandoned them. I think the Dragons will be competitive, but they'll lose it at the back end. So
yeah, I agree.
So, unanimous decision, the South Sydney Rabbitohs for the 2021 Charity Shield.
Winning it yet again.
Well, all right. That is full time from us. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and subscribe to the Sideline Chat podcast. And don't forget to join us next time. We will be doing a wrap of the Charity Shield and the A-Team trial matches to come. It should be very interesting to see how combinations work early, and we're getting closer to that 11th of March start date. And you know what? I can't wait for it to happen.
Me neither. And with all the trial matches, we need to try and keep up with all the score lines, because there's multiple on within half an hour to an hour of each other.
Also, don't forget to check out our social media accounts. We'll actually be posting a question for you to have a bit of a look at and see what your reaction to that is. Until then, this has been the Sideline Chat podcast. I'm Connor Marcellus, and alongside Mark Henry, we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.